There are a lot of things in current day gaming to be frustrated about, loads and loads of things, which is why I hate insert video game is all the rave these days. Contrary to popular belief though, it's not new to be angry. Companies do in fact enjoy extracting money from people by any means necessary. So I wanted to do a little throwback to a time in history that was actually pretty disgusting and went over a lot of people's heads, and it's gross for reasons that I hope become clear. We'll start out with a little story to set everything up. I've been revisiting old Call of Duty games recently, like World at War, Black Ops 1, Modern Warfare 3, and Call of Duty World War 2 so far that I also covered recently. While I was playing that game though, I realized it took a long time to find matches, like an ungodly amount of time. I just assumed at first like that the game's just old, not a lot of people are on anymore, it's just something I need to deal with, until I remembered something. I'm a season pass owner, and all the DLC was still installed. So I thought to myself, if I uninstall them, will that help? So I got rid of every map pack, then lo and behold, my problem was fixed. Matchmaking times were cut into a quarter, and I was finally able to play my game that I spent money on. So I was basically being punished for having maps installed that I also paid money for. Yes, it was years and years ago, but still. This situation tossed me right into the small hole that we're going to relive today, which is how season passes, mainly for multiplayer games, were a pretty disgusting microtransaction system, almost being a scam, depending on how you look at it, and none of us even realized, or most people didn't. If you don't understand how or why, bear with me as we look at this. The Season Pass DLC model started with Black Ops 2, at least for Call of Duty, or I guess technically Modern Warfare 3 started it with the whole Call of Duty Elite thing that they put in there, but the actual named Season Passes that you could buy began with Black Ops 2. Then of course there were map packs in previous games like Call of Duty 4, World at War, Modern Warfare 2, and Black Ops 1, which fall into the second part of the conversation that we'll get to in a bit because the outcome is the same. The whole shtick for a season pass was buy our game for $60 and give us $50 extra. Sometimes it was $30 or $40, but for Call of Duty it was always $50. And you get 4 map packs in return, or if you buy the Ultimate Deluxe Super Edition, you get a camo, character skin, or whatever Activision decided to dangle in front of us to buy it. A lot of players, of course, bit down on the cookie, thinking I'll be playing the game anyways, so why not, dropping their money on the season pass and game. Which is all fine and dandy, but in hindsight, it just went straight over your head how you're just putting blind faith for the content to be good. You didn't actually know what you were getting outside of the vagueness of map packs. You were essentially purchasing a promise. There weren't any content previews until the map packs were ready to release. And what if all the maps were terrible? Or maybe you wouldn't like them. You didn't know. And if you want to take it a step further and play a little game, how many of these maps do you actually remember? Everyone obviously remembers Terminal, Firing Range, Standoff, even less popular ones like Aftermath, Pipeline, or Airfield. But what about Battery? Can you tell me which DLC in World at War had this map? Probably not. It was DLC 3. What about the map Salvage? You can name every map in Modern Warfare 2, but what about this one? It's from DLC 1, also called the Stimulus Package. And let's do one more. What is this map called? Which DLC in Black Ops 2 had this map? You bought it, you should know. It's called Pod from DLC 4. I'm not even trying to say these maps are terrible or anything, rather how 90% of the maps were just not memorable, outside of the grinds or coves from Black Ops 2 or maybe a zoo from Black Ops 1. Launch maps were typically better and more memorable than ones most players blindly put money into before release. There might be some pod heads out there and say it's the best map ever made, but I guarantee you no one knew what the fuck that map was. These maps just kinda came and went and you played them and then forgot about them shortly after. Honestly, making me feel pretty stupid. I did this for years on end, every single year, slapping down $50 for content that I didn't even know if I was going to like or even remember. But in a weird way, we were also being manipulated to buy them. The classic FOMO, or fear of missing out. If you think back, how many of you were on edge, but the social pressure of your friends getting invested or talking about DLC made you go through with getting a season pass? Maybe you felt you couldn't play with them if you didn't buy it, or they didn't want to play with you since they couldn't play the maps that they bought, making you go fuck it and drop the money on it, weirdly creating a trickle-down effect. In a roundabout way, players felt forced to buy map packs or DLC because all their friends were getting it too. You don't want to miss out on the fun, so buy it. Pay for the season pass, even though you don't actually know what you're buying. Plus, you need to remember this was long before the days of getting free maps. We were lucky to get anything for free during this time. We got what, like Mach-in Night, I think I said that right, and World at War, which wasn't really new, it was just a nighttime version of a map already in the game. The pre-order exclusives that weren't really exclusives, like Free Fall from Call of Duty Ghosts, that was horrendously bad, and others like Camp and Tan from World War II. Season passes were essentially the only way to get any new content for a long time in this series. Or any series for that matter, since again, it's not just Call of Duty, like other companies saw this model and replicated it. The good old monkey see, monkey do. Sell map packs to players, offer season passes, and reap the rewards. If you want to be even more cynical, when those map packs had re-releases, you were buying maps that you've already played just in a new game, which isn't always a bad thing, but shouldn't re-releases of maps be free? That's how I see it, at least. If you take both of Modern Warfare 2's DLC packs, they had 5 maps with 2 remakes each. Overgrown, Strike, Crash, and Vacant were the remakes, giving only 6 original maps for the $30 asking price, more than 50% of the game's initial cost. And believe me, I have no issues with those maps. I'm just trying to get the point across that people played those maps 2 years before in a game they paid $60 for, and then they just paid for them again. When it comes to spending real money on map packs, don't you think they should have new maps and not maps that you just played like a year or 2 before? It's just kind of back-assed if you think about it. But funny how this isn't even the worst part. Some may not even think blindly paying for content is a bad thing, for whatever reason, or even think anything I just said is horrible, since they liked the game and they wanted to support their favorite franchise. It may also be difficult for some people to look at this from a different perspective that's not, I hate new games, old games are better, so I don't care, it's better than now. I'm just trying to lay out some of the issues that people felt at the time, and even looking back. Like, the idea of not knowing what you're buying can cause some issues. I don't think anyone would disagree with that part. Like, what if you hated 3 out of the 4 map packs that released? And again, most of the maps clearly weren't good enough to be widely memorable outside of very specific ones. And I'm sure everything mentioned in that part of the conversation could be pretty divisive. But if we take a real step back though and head into our next piece, asking the question, during one of these older COD games' life cycles, if you recall, like after a map pack dropped, how many times did you actively go into the playlist? Maybe for the first week, possibly 2, before returning to the normal ones. And that's when you realized how matchmaking times got longer and longer, even in the DLC playlist itself. Matchmaking may have been fast in the first few days, then it drops off a cliff, creating the part where I said season passes might kind of be a scam depending on how you look at it or who you ask. It's because of player segregation. Naturally, games lose players over time. It's always been a thing. Day 1, player base is big. Day 150, player base is smaller. Finding matches can be a tough ask later in a game's life cycle because players may get bored, burned out, or stop playing the game for whatever reason. But matchmaking becomes even harder when you have map packs installed. Since what happened was, when each DLC released, there would be a separate playlist only having new maps in rotation. After a short time, the playlist would be removed, and those new maps would be stuck into every playlist, which sounds good initially. You can play the new maps and the launch ones together, until you remember, you need to buy these, and they're in every playlist, so now you can only play with other people who own them, which can create some pretty fucked up scenarios. Say you bought the season pass for Black Ops 2, and maybe you thought, the maps on DLC 1 and 3 are horrible, I don't like them, get them the fuck off my system, but map packs 2 and 4 you loved, and are the only ones you keep downloaded. Problem is, well, 1, you got 2 map packs that you hate, alluding back to the not knowing what you're buying issue again, and secondly, the game is only going to find matches with players who have the same DLCs downloaded as you, creating this situation where matches were almost impossible to find since the likelihood of finding players who are also in that specific scenario is slim to none. So you had 2 options. 1, install both map pack 1 and 3 again to increase your player pool, or 2, remove the map pack you paid money for, even if you like it, since you can barely find matches with it downloaded. Which is pretty fucked up if you think about it. Imagine this scenario, right? Say you didn't even buy the season pass, and your friends were all talking about how awesome Map Pack 3 is. You think, alright, I'll get it, whatever, it's $15. You play it with them, not even realizing you completely boned yourself, because you can now only play with other people who only have Map Pack 3, which won't be many people. The only real way around this situation was, again, uninstalling the maps you paid for, or partying with someone who doesn't have any map packs downloaded. Looking back, this is actually like eye-openingly disgusting. In a weird way, you were punishing yourself for buying more content for a game that you like. With each passing DLC, you were segregating yourself more and more. The player pool would get smaller and smaller, especially if you removed the DLC. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned how I was dealing with the matchmaking problems until I got rid of my map packs in World War II, then everything was fixed. So there was sort of a timer on the content that you bought. In modern times, if you go back and play any of these games' multiplayers, you need to uninstall all the DLC or not install it in the first place. Otherwise, finding a match is astronomically more difficult. It's unreal how only one Call of Duty game got it right, which was Modern Warfare 3, letting you press a button to disable map packs in rotation. Which is still fucked up, don't get me wrong. You need to, in a roundabout way, remove maps you paid for just to play the game. I think my favorite messed up part about this whole situation is if you go back and play Call of Duty 4 or World at War, lobbies can form with a DLC map that you don't own, and if you're lucky enough to fill the lobby up, and the DLC map is not skipped, you'll end up being kicked out of the lobby because you didn't buy the DLC. That is still full price, by the way, which is mind-boggling. All of the season passes and map packs are still full price. So if you bought any of these now, you're essentially shooting yourself in the foot buying content you can't even play anymore. I own a lot of the season passes to these COD games, but all I can do now is just walk around and look at the maps. Of course, the slight defense about map packs or the season passes is zombies, which you can go back and play, but when purely speaking on multiplayer, your best bet is to remove them. Since even when you do find multiplayer lobbies with DLCs installed, the matchmaker has to stretch so far, your connection will presumably be terrible or borderline unplayable, so it's like pick your poison. But in my eyes, even with the zombies, that doesn't defeat the fact how one half of what you buy is only playable for a certain time frame and you can't even use it anymore. This is not just a 2025 problem either. This was like a year 2 problem, or year of if you only had select DLCs installed. It's just crazy to think back the immediate second you spent the $15 or the $50, problems instantly arose. No one paid attention to it though because they liked the game. But just because you like something or have a lot of nostalgic feelings towards it doesn't mean there weren't actual problems. This is a pretty shitty microtransaction system, to be frank. And it wasn't just multiplayer games, because single player games were tainted with season passes as well, having problems of their own. Borderlands 2 was a personal one of mine. The first 2 DLC packs at release had a bug where you couldn't progress. The game would think you don't own the DLC pack even though you're playing on it, not letting you pick up any new weapons or quest items. So you essentially wasted $15 or $30 if you bought both, just to wait for a patch to come out that took over a week to release. That's just a personal one of mine. Maybe there's some crazy controversy I never experienced with single player games. I'm sure someone will share a time they got burned. I just feel multiplayer games were affected by season passes worse. And this little hole I got into really made me second guess myself about getting so angry towards everything in the modern gaming landscape. Yes, there are loads and loads of issues, but what I went through is like pretty messed up actually. Season passes in a roundabout way were a scam. You were basically just buying content with a time limit on it, and in Call of Duty's case, doing it year after year after year. Also the fact you didn't know what you were buying before release, and you were basically punishing yourself for purchasing content due to the player segregation. And online, I have read how in later titles like Infinite Warfare or World War II, even if you have the DLCs installed, you will eventually find a lobby in the regular rotation. How long you need to wait, I don't know, since I continuously wasted time trying to get into a match in World War II to no avail. Then the immediate second I removed all my DLC, the problem was gone. Even if that finding matches claim is true, you're still not able to play the DLC maps anymore, so I don't understand why these are still being sold. In modern times, if you buy these, like, you are literally being scammed. Looking at the time period, I can see why people were buying these season passes, like they wanted new content for their game, but there were some serious issues here that everyone just overlooked or was too naive to really understand. It really does start making me question myself. Maybe people do sometimes take the free maps and weapon updates for granted, since it's become so normalized in the culture now, everyone just expects it. So the whole intrigue is gone. They just keep asking for more and more and more and more. This season passes versus newer game monetization could actually be some sort of controversial topic that I didn't even know existed. And when I'm talking about the free updates, I'm of course just speaking on the idea of it, since we all know games sometimes will claim new content is coming and it's just a $90 skin pack. But I really do wonder how gamers would react to having a season pass model return in gaming. Like, would they freak out and want free updates to return? Wanting skin packs to come back? Maybe get mad and say the old days are better. Or oh wait, they can't, because that's where the season pass model existed. This is really a pickle. Again though, companies are going to do whatever they can to extract as much money from people as possible. It's been happening since the beginning of time, and obviously it will never stop. They just evolve and change how they do it to fit the landscape of the gaming market. So with all of this said, let me know your thoughts about the season passes versus modern monetization in the comments. I'm actually curious to hear as many thoughts as possible on it. And on your way down there, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I hope to see you all again in the next video.